Hey, family. This episode is a bit of a mashup, a remix. I had the honor of being with Jesse Jackson Jr. on his podcast discussing family caregiving, the toll it takes, the financial, emotional, and physical costs, and just how poor of a job we're doing as a nation to take care of family caregivers. Now, this came in response to Jesse's op-ed in the USA Today newspaper, really outlining what he and his family were experiencing as they cared for his father, the incomparable Reverend Jesse L. Jackson Sr. Well, unfortunately, since this originally aired, Sr. has lost his battle, but the information remains pertinent. I hope you enjoy, and I look forward to your feedback. Parenting Up, Caregiving Adventures with comedian Jay Smiles is the intense journey of unexpectedly being fully responsible for my mama. For over a decade, I've been chipping away at the unknown, advocating for her, and pushing Alzheimer's awareness on anyone and anything with a heartbeat. Spoiler alert, this shit is heavy. That's why I started doing comedy, so be ready for the jokes. Caregiver newbies, OGs, and village members just willing to prop up a caregiver, you are in the right place.
Hi, this is Zeddy. I hope you enjoy my daughter's podcast. Is that okay?
Today's supporter shout out comes from YouTube, William Gaynor 7602. And this was in response to one of my tidbits about Advocacy Day in the state of Georgia. I gave a whole bunch of numbers about basically they're getting free labor from us, the family caregivers, in order to keep the healthcare system afloat in Georgia. Gave a whole bunch of numbers in money and in hours. William said, ... Don't hold your breath for their help, but thanks for this revelation. Also, it's best to teach or change young people's diets. It is contributory. I agree. I agree completely. Young people, old people, medium, middle people, change your diets to a brain healthy situation. Now, if you would like to be the recipient of a supporter shout out, you know what to do. Leave a review and a comment on Apple Podcast or YouTube. Today's episode, Undervalued and Underpaid, the Unjust Cost of Caregiving, with Jesse Jackson Jr. and me, Jay Smiles.
We have a very special guest who will also be joining us this hour, Janae Smith. Her life shifted dramatically when her father passed away suddenly, and her mother was diagnosed with dementia soon thereafter. Trained as an engineer, product engineer, and lawyer, she became a full-time caregiver. She sought refuge in comedy, discovering both healing and a new calling as Jay Smiles. She has since performed nationwide and abroad, sharing stages with comedy greats while weaving her caregiving journey into her art. In 2020, she launched the podcast Parenting Up, Caregiving Adventures with comedian Jay Smiles, to create a space for caregivers to lead with levity because humor actually heals. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation with Jay Smiles. Janae, I just want to say hi to you right now. Hi, Janae.
Hi, how are you, Jesse?
I'm certainly grateful that you're with us today, and boy, we have so much in common, and so does Atiba on this question of caregiving. But to introduce our program, let me allow our regular co-host and contributor to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, our Conversations with Atiba, to set the stage for the next hour. Atiba.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse, for that. And Janae, thank you so much for being with us. Janae, first off, in terms of your journey, I feel like it would be impolite for me not to share that we have known each other for the better part of 25 plus years. And knowing both of you.
I'm just 32.
Well, Well, I'm not going to say where we met then.
The Atiba files. Release the Atiba file.
But that said, as you know, Jesse wrote a very profound opinion editorial a few weeks ago about caregiving. And I know that the country and the world know the story of his father and all the amazing things that his father accomplished and did over his life. And now Jesse has started telling the story more publicly about, what has been going on behind the scenes from a caregiving standpoint. So very gracious and very grateful to Jesse for starting this conversation. And it's a conversation that I'm sure that families and people are having, and friends among friends for years, but in terms of the national dialogue as this goes along. But as we stage this conversation, as you and I have spoken about this, I was hoping that you could first also tell us a bit about your father and your mother and you before we get into where your life changed a few years ago. So Janae, as I was mentioning, what I was hoping is that you could give us just a little bit of background about your parents and then you as a family. And then we can go into talking about how your life changed when your mom was your mom's diagnosis.
Absolutely. My pleasure. My father is deceased. His name is Jock Michael Smith. I guess some of the high points would be that he was the only Black man to have a national partnership with Johnny Cochran. My father was the cornerstone of what we now know as the National Cochran Firm. He was very close to Mr. Cochran. I'm still very close to Mr. Cochran's widow. My dad was a pillar of the community. He did a lot of things in terms of civil rights, and he did a lot of things in terms of the law. He represented the estate of Mrs. Rosa Parks. He represented the King family. And at the time that he passed, he actually had the largest verdict for an African-American lawyer in the nation, $1.6 billion. And a little known fact is that while he was doing all of this juggernaut legal stuff, his true passion was always sports, specifically baseball. And from 1985 until his passing in 2012, he amassed the largest collection of game-worn sports memorabilia in the world. More than a Black man, more than a white man, more than a Jewish person, more than a Chinese person. And I call it a great legacy of my life was that after my dad's passing, I was able to ink a deal with the Smithsonian. And so our collection is my family's collection that I am spearheading. We're now we're really the reason why the sports gallery exists in the National Museum of History and Culture, also known as Blacksonian for anybody in DC. My mother is originally from Montgomery, Alabama. My dad is a New Yorker, but they met in Alabama. My mom was a part of the civil rights movement as a young girl, and she patterned her entire life around following Dr. King and individuals like Jesse's father. They marched together a lot. She was jailed, all the things. What she decided to do was, hey, how can I keep pushing forward the poor people's campaign? And so my mother, by trade, is a CPA. She was a forensic accountant, expert witness. She was the first woman of any color to have the type of consultancy firm that she had in the nation. So she made sure that utilities, gas, electric, light, telephone, kept our rates reasonable. And so they hated her for it. They actually tried to kill her a few times. I got a picture on the bookshelf behind me about that. So the really odd thing about me becoming a caregiver is my parents were so healthy and self-sufficient, or so I thought. My dad had a massive heart attack on the couch at 62 years old. My mom at 62 was within 3 months of my dad passing, was diagnosed with 2 forms of dementia. So I'm an only child. I grew up not having to help them do anything. They didn't ever need $5 from me. They didn't ever need me to help them turn on their cell phone. They were texting, and they had a BlackBerry before I did. I ain't had the money. They did. So I wasn't prepared to have to help or to have to step in. The life I created, I went to Howard, I went to Stanford, became a lawyer. I was living and working between Africa, Europe, and the United States. Wow. Really combining my love of advocacy, which is a part of me being from Montgomery, Alabama, to help young African girls and women really have a better way at STEM things, and to use my design connections with in Italy to make all that happen. And then to come back to America and get the seed capital. And all that was working great. And then literally overnight, it all blew up. And I needed to run my dad's law practice, run my mom's consulting firm, keep my life going. Oh, and figure out, is my mama gonna die? No. Is she? Is she dying? Because no one had told me that a traumatic event in life could trigger the early onset of Alzheimer's. So it took us a minute to determine what it was.
I'm just sitting here with my mouth wide open because the trajectory of your life was on one path, and then the care of loved ones suddenly changed the trajectory, which obviously can come at great costs. I mean, it is almost as if stepping into the ring, someone literally knocks you out. And, my father, in my case, Atiba, is, a 240-pound, 6'4", 6'6" individual who literally has to be maneuvered. Now, the onset of dementia, that is a parent who literally can wander down the street and you not find them, from someone who is extremely as capable of Miss Smith's father, a leader in the Cochran firm, if not the main person behind Johnny Cochran, all the way to having to provide not only for him, but then ultimately providing for her mother. And that is a career-changing event. And it is happening to more than 63 million Americans as we speak. Tiba?
Yeah, and so, in terms of going into that, thank you, Janae, for sharing that. Also, so how did you embrace that, or how did you deal with that? Because you also had mentioned the sports collection and the museum, and we know you're Jay Smiles, you're a comedian. So what was that adjustment like for you, and how did you get to here?
The adjustment was chaotic. It did not look cute. It wasn't cute. It wasn't pretty. I made a lot of mistakes. And by mistakes, I'm really speaking of my self-care, what I would do to manage who am I going to be in this new normal. To be really honest with you, I didn't believe them when they said my mom had 2 forms of dementia, Alzheimer's and normal pressure hydrocephalus. They said, oh, you're going to have to keep her for the rest of her life. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's fine. She has a business. The only thing this woman is known for is her brain. How can her brain be broken? I would have been better with like liver cancer. Not that I want her to have cancer, but it would have made more sense. I was like, it cannot be her brain. That's all that everyone celebrates about her. So when it became obvious that my mother really could not manage any of her affairs, like within 90 days, she could not drive. She couldn't write a checkbook. She didn't even know if she was going to the bathroom on herself. And I said, okay, all right, I got to figure this out. Now, I got into family business mode, right? This is survival, and it's the world against me and my mama. And on behalf of my daddy, I got to take care of his boo. Now, what happened though is I gained a bunch of weight. I almost had a stroke. I was doing very unhealthy things, alcohol, maybe some drugs. I know this is a family show. What I'm going to say is I made it through the point and through the time but it was awful because in order to care for my mother and get my parents' affairs in order, I had to literally leave myself out of the equation. It really did stink. And it was actually my physician who told me, hey, Jay, you're going to die before your mom if you don't change something. About 2 or 3 years into my mom's diagnosis, she said, your numbers are going all in the wrong direction. You're not sleeping. You're on the verge of a stroke. You got to switch something up. And at the end of the switch up was comedy. She told me to try to find a hobby. It was on Groupon, and I saw a class. I thought I was just going to have a way to blow off steam rather than picking up Remy Martin 17 or 38, which is what I was drinking for 2 years straight. I said, I'm going to go to this comedy class. I'm going to meet some new friends. They don't know who I am. They not going to ask me for nothing. Because I also got to say, it was a lot of stress with all the people who decided that they figured my daddy left me $5 billion and they wanted some. I'm like, hey, there's no Mackenzie Scott over here. I don't know what y'all are thinking, but most of those verdicts were severely reduced. I mean, I'm good, but I ain't got $5 billion. So comedy came literally throughout a medical crisis for me. And I ended up falling in love with it. Jay Smiles was born. And ultimately, about 5 years after I started comedy, we go into the pandemic. The pandemic hits. I cannot perform live because I'm worried that I may bring the virus back to my mom. And that is when the Parenting Up podcast started. And that really was my stronghold into becoming a care advocate globally and throughout the nation.
I'm so identifying with your path because wherever there's comedy, there's also mass tragedy, and wherever there's mass tragedy, out of the trauma comes a humor and comes a response to it that really means self-care, that you have to make light of very, very serious subjects. And I don't think everyone fully appreciates that. I know that we're going to have an even more fascinating show, and we've got at least 3 more minutes left in this segment. But in our own family this morning, Atiba, I woke up to my mother allowing friends to see my father. Someone took a picture of him, and then that picture became part of a newspaper article. And we've been walking back all of this day, the narrative of the access that we gave to a family friend who then had a photographer who then sold the picture and then reeling it all back in, which has nothing to do with the individual care in addition to what someone else took upon themselves to notify the public what they think they had a right to do. So I'm sitting here saying to myself, if it weren't so serious, it would be laughable. Because the only way to handle it is to say, isn't this just us? I mean, isn't this just us taking advantage of a person's tragedy, a family's tragedy? It's hard enough, Janae, on its own without someone engaging it and trying to make a selfie or a snapshot or a newspaper story or be a sudden reporter to the tragedy of it all. So what I want to say is, I am so proud of you. I'm proud of the healing that you're sharing with us that came from how you took the traumatic experience of the tragedy of dementia and the loss of memory, which our family is dealing with, but then you made light of it. I mean, my brothers and sisters and I are laughing at some things today that we have never laughed at. And we laugh at people who in our sadness, don't know the joy that we're finding in this hour and in this moment. With that said, we have about a minute before we come forward. Atiba, I'm gonna let you take us out.
Yeah, and Janae, if you will allow me, when I think about your father, often I told you, like, meeting your dad was like one of the greatest things for me because it was the first time I had seen an African American man who was doing all these different things, and I'm rocking right now because I'm thinking about your dad. With something that he said, he talked about how he was using the sports memorabilia collection, that part of which is now, I mean, and Jesse, to give you an idea, Jesse Owens track shoes from the 1936 Olympics are in that collection. They're in the museum.
Wow.
Serena Williams' iconic outfit from the U.S. Open is in that museum. But there are other things. Muhammad Ali's boxing gloves and robes that I can actually say I physically put on. But his stories that he used with that sports memorabilia collection, particularly talking to young people and kids and motivational speaking, was about how these people went from tragedy to triumph. So in terms of what we're talking about today and how you just eloquently spoke about with Janae and her story, I'm going to stop. This is about going from a tragedy and figuring out ways that we can get to a triumph.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. listening to KBLA Talk 1580. More with Atiba on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show when we come forward. Janae Mariel Smith's life shifted dramatically when her father passed away suddenly and her mother was diagnosed with dementia. Janae serves on Hilarity for Charities Care Advisory Board and Links to Equity's Community Advisory Board. She continues to balance her professional achievements and advocacy with her most important role, caring for her mother, Zeddy, in their 13th year of navigating Alzheimer's and NPH. Her unique journey combines advocacy, humor, and resilience, making her a powerful voice for both caregivers and communities impacted by Alzheimer's. Janae, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show and our conversations with Atiba.
Thank you so very much. If I may have a moment, in the previous segment, Jesse, you gave a very vulnerable look into what happened when someone came to visit your dad and they decided to do something distasteful with the photo. I have had so many similar circumstances that no one is allowed to visit my mom without me in the home anymore. I had to make a hard line. I'm considered to be a witch with another first letter by many family members and many of my mom's friends. They're like, who are you? I knew her before you were born. You don't know what you're doing. And I let them have all of their opinions, because what's most important is that I keep my mom emotionally stable and happy. And then I need to have myself as grounded as possible. And if people mean her some harm, or if people are just really ignorant to the process of what it means to have dementia and how quickly things can unravel, I will wrap up this point with this one example. The IRS decided, the government's taxing system decided that I was money laundering, and they decided that my mother was dead and I wasn't claiming it. For 3 years, they made me prove my mother was alive. While they had no record of a death, there was no obituary, no funeral, nothing online, but it was from scuttlebutt talk around Montgomery, Alabama. Why did Janae, why is Jay and Zeddy in Atlanta? There must be something nefarious going on. Why would she leave her hometown? And so I had to actually let an IRS manager into my home while my mother was asleep to lay eyes on her.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, that was the rule in our home. We don't let people in. And somehow this particular issue got around us. But I cannot believe, and I'd like to talk some policy in maybe in the next segment about what can be done to support caregivers, Janae, because I think you have an interesting perspective and a very vital one. Atiba?
Yeah, so Jay, Jay smiles. It's really amazing to me. First of all, they not only you talk about this, but you do talk about it and the seriousness of it, but it still brings some levity to it. It's kind of like the audacity. And Jesse, in terms of what you have gone through and are going through in your family, for me, I don't understand that, and I don't understand how someone else doesn't have empathy from that standpoint, because the part of the role, and I think particularly within our communities, is that we try to take this route to be a caregiver to protect our loved ones, because not just because it's the right thing to do, but because we love them so much. And but so that love in terms of letting someone else into that space, I believe, should be respected. It should go without saying. That all said, I'm sure you have other stories, Jay, that you could share. Is there anything that comes to mind in terms of, like, with your podcast and what you're doing with your podcast, as well as what you're doing with your comedy? Is there anything that comes to mind that you'd like to share that, in terms of that makes this real, and at the same time that you found some comfort with comedy?
Yes, comedy saved my life. And when I say it saved my life, like comedy is not a living entity, but comedy gave me an escape. It gave me a place to go and not be me and not live my reality. So comedy will forever have a very special place with me as it relates to how the humor has assisted other caregivers, which is the only reason I started the podcast. And I will say this, the Holy Spirit is a bully. I didn't want to do the podcast. The Holy Spirit bullied me unmercifully every day, multiple times for 6 weeks, until I said, okay, whatever, I'll do the little stupid podcast, but don't nobody even want to talk about Alzheimer's and caregiving. It sucks. Anyway, the Holy Spirit won. I'm in year 6 of the podcast, but most of the family members, we are really, our audience is for family caregivers, primarily people who have not been trained. They're not doctors, they're not nurses. You just, all of a sudden, somebody you love needs you and you try to figure it out. And they're coming from all over the world. Two things that I get all the time is, number one, the family was in denial for a very, very long time about the changes that were happening in that individual. So I would tell everyone, if something in your belly is saying your mom, your husband, they're not quite themselves, take them to a neurologist, not their regular doctor, a neurologist, and have a neurological full assessment done if you can. The second thing is that caregivers feel so isolated and so alone. These are things that I'm pulling these two out that I've heard globally. They feel so isolated and so alone, no one understands. People understand if you have a newborn, you're going to be sleepy, they're going to give you some diapers. Nobody has ever sent me Depends for my mom. And her Depends cost way more than my nephew's little bitty infant Pampers. So you all could help us, but we feel so isolated and we feel scared. We don't really know what we're doing, and we don't want to even need to be doing it. So humor has helped. I have heard that humor helps them feel like they're not losing their minds and that they're not alone. Because if I'm telling a story about me or someone else that I spoke with, they can then see themselves in those examples.
I'm particularly honored that John Diggles is joining our program. John is an expert in the healthcare and the caregiving space. He's the president of Ascent Strategies. John, we have just about 45 seconds before we come forward, and I know we're going to talk about policy in the next segment. We're looking at somewhere between $500 billion and $600 billion a year, an entire economy to provide the kind of care that Janae and I, as well as Atiba, believe that the American people deserve at this stage of their lives. John, just a brief moment before we come forward.
And listening to Janae's pain, her story, what she's been through, that's a cost we haven't figured out how to measure. It's critical for us to measure because it's essential that we help caregivers in order for that to go forward.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580. We're going to be talking policy and how we can fix the caregiver crisis. It'll just be the beginning of a very long conversation that we will have over a very long period of time. More on KBLA Talk 1580 when we come forward on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. I'm hoping that we will give some consideration to the Civil Rights Act of 2027, a new piece of legislation that recognizes the role that caregivers play in our country, in our society. And I think it needs to be a comprehensive piece of legislation, not only for those who need the care, but for the mental health of those who are providing the care. They've not been trained. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to administer medicine. And I mean the mental health. There are days, and I hate to say this, where I block some siblings of mine from I just can't handle it. I just need everyone to handle what's going on in their space and do the best that they can. But you can't just we go at each other's throat as a family because we want to provide the care that even nurses themselves cannot provide for members of our family. I'm so glad that Janae has brought this to us in such a forceful way. Janae, we have about 5 minutes before we completely come forward. I'd like you not only to end the program with a word of hope, but please share with us how we can follow your podcast and how we can be supportive of your work just before you give us our final word of hope.
Okay. Thank you so much. This has been refreshing because to speak to individuals like the panel that you've assembled gives me hope as somebody who's in the trenches that, hey, there are others that do care. There are people in positions of great influence and power that see us and are shaking trees, kissing babies, and maybe snatching politicians to make them understand that you got to do something right now. Parentingup.com is the website. You can find us on YouTube, also at Parenting Up. We have episodes every other week, and we are audio for those who prefer that for podcasts. Anywhere you can get a podcast, you will see Parenting Up with Jay Smiles. You don't even have to type the longer version, Parenting Up, Caregiving Adventures with comedian Jay Smiles. If you just do Parenting Up and Jay Smiles, you'll find us. And we have quite a few engagements happening in the state of Georgia where we will be lobbying with the local Alzheimer's chapter. And we will also be in February in San Diego for the International Alzheimer's Conference. So we're trying to let as many community leaders, but also just everyday citizens who have not become caregivers yet, and I stress yet, to know what in the world this feels like. Where I would like to really wrap up my point of view is with what I call the brain drain, which is the same as job exit. I was an inventor and a product engineer for Ford and Gillette, and I worked at the Cochran firm. Who knows what I could have done on other teams? Who knows if I was supposed to invent something that might have helped caregivers? But I had to leave the entire job industry or else my mother would have perished. I'm an only child. I don't have any children. I'm not married. And unfortunately, no one on either side of my family stepped up enough that I could stay gainfully employed and my mom would be okay. I so appreciate you calling it a modest wage. There is nobody that offers caregivers, family caregivers, a living wage. Because what has happened, and I've seen this with many people in our Parenting Up community, the family member who can earn the most, a doctor, a lawyer, somebody who owns maybe 2 or 3 different versions of a lawn care company, they then get somebody like me, put them in home with Big Mama, and they are now paying that person's bills and Big Mama's bills. So then they got to take on extra stuff at work. That's the best case scenario for families who figured out how to get along and do it together. I call it the brain drain because at the bottom line, the American, dare I say, the global economy are losing out on what we would bring, whether I was a Walmart greeter or flipping hamburgers. You still need them to be flipped. If I'm cutting grass, it still needs to happen. I was on the verge of solving a global problem for young women and young girls. And I had to get out of it completely because to stay attached at all would have meant I couldn't give my mother her all. I didn't want anyone who has not become a caregiver yet to know, baby, it's coming. Unless you leave this earth early, which I don't wish for you, it's coming. And you don't know what to do. We need policy and we need changes immediately so that caregivers, not only can we keep our jobs, but we can keep our mental sanity. So are you going to offer us something? You could offer us therapy. You could make sure we can still get our jobs and still get paid. And
Thank you,
no
Janae.
matter what, one of the examples I try to use, which is what I'm hoping to push for with
Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580. It's a hard stop at the top of the hour. Janae, you are so wonderful. You will be back on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Thank you, Atiba, and thank you, John Diggles. More when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
The snuggle up. Y'all, I had to cop a squat on this one. I need to sit down and rest my spine as I pull together this snuggle up. If Jesse Jackson Jr. needed to write an op-ed for USA Today and then brought on caregivers, scientists, physicians, lobbyists, policymakers, because he and his family were overwhelmed, struggling, and under-resourced, we are in a conundrum. That is effing ridiculous. If the Jacksons had to cry uncle, what the hell are we supposed to do? So, what's the snuggle up, Jay? Well, what I want to tell you is you're doing a good job. It's not about, ooh, if I only had more money, if I only had more connections, if I only had better insurance. Maybe not. If we only can get a cure, and if we can only get legislation passed so that we can take off and still get paid, that's the if only. So let's keep advocating, let's keep putting our foot in Alzheimer's ass, and let's keep pushing the needle on making sure others understand what this disease is all about. Thank you for tuning in. I mean, really, 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 thank you so very much for tuning in. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening on your favorite podcast audio platform. Either way, wherever you are, subscribe. Come back. That's the way you're gonna know when we do something next. Y'all know how it is. I'm Jay Smiles. I might just drop something hot in the middle of the night.